Hi, everyone.
Picture.
So happy to have you all here. Just give a couple moments for people to settle into the space. And while we're doing that, please feel free to put where you're coming in from, tuning in from in the chat, your name, organization, affiliation, anything that feels good to you to share. And yeah, thanks for being here. Okay, we got some more folks coming in the chat. Welcome. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hello. So good to see some familiar faces. Welcome. Feel free to share in the chat. This one thing I love about these conversations is we often share resources, different books, anything you like in the chat. So feel free to drop things there when it feels good. Welcome, everyone. So good to see you. All right. Well, we're just at 1:05, so I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone to the next episode of Community Conversations with the Afrofuturism Collective. My name is Benta Dixon, and I'm the community facilitator for this wonderful group. And we are so grateful to be a project of the Together for Birds initiative with American Bird Conservancy, as well as sponsored by Rewild. So we're really excited to continue to have these discussions around these intersections of environmental justice, climate justice, and culture, and the African diaspora. And also today, we're talking also about gender, right? So we're talking about women and Black women in this field. And thank you for sharing in the chat, like where you're coming from and things like that. Please continue to do that. A little about me. I am currently based in Washington, D.C., relatively new to the field of environmental justice and conservation. So I'll say that up front. And I'm always excited to learn through these discussions. And one thing I was just sharing before we got on was, I think oftentimes we are engaged in that work, but we just don't know it. So there's so many different entry points that we may not understand that the work we're doing in community is directly related to the environment and to caring for nature and for people. So to get us started today, I see, hi everyone, greetings from Sudan, welcome. Mathani, so happy to have you here. Everyone, I see Namo in the chat, welcome. All right. So I think how we'll get started is just have our lovely panel to introduce themselves. And the way we'll do it is if someone wants to volunteer, you can go first and then just pass it on to the next person. You can share, your name, anything that really speaks to you right now, but where you're coming from, your organization, and yeah, we'll get started like that.
Okay. I'll start. My name is Tulani Thomas. I live in New Jersey. I'm a New Yorker though at heart. My organization is Tutu's Green World. And our organization, we basically teach the younger generation how to live eco-friendly through a children's book character named Tutu. Our motto is small acts make big impacts, because we feel that every little action cumulatively make big results and big change in this environmental fight that we're all a part of. Thanks for having me, Vinta. I'll pass it to Dr. Jamika Hodnett.
Almost, doctor.
I'll manifest it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamika Hodnett. I'm based right outside of DC in Hyattsville, but originally from Roanoke, Virginia. Do lots of stuff, but I do run an organization part-time called Rise to Thrive, and we support women of color in the climate justice space. We're mostly an organizing organization, so working with a lot of community-based partners to transition the world to a greener and cleaner economy. And I will pass it to Elsa.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Elsa Mengistu. I'm the program director here at Black Girl Environmentalist. My work is primarily just pulling in young Black girls into our space and making sure that they can stay long term. Um, so I'm really excited to have this conversation specifically with you guys today. I forgot I was supposed to pass it. I'll pass it to Wawa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wawa. I am also a Black Girl Environmentalist. I'm the executive director. And as Ethel said, our work is really to nurture the next generation of Black girls and Black gender expansive folks who are interested in climate leadership. And so our focus is really on early career individuals, so like first 10 years of experience. And we have different programming that really falls under 3 impact areas: community empowerment, green workforce development, and narrative change. And I just got back from our Hazelin Johnson Fellowship Program retreat. So super, super excited about the ecosystems of care that we are getting to build alongside all of you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all so much for those beautiful introductions and for being here. I think that just hearing where you all are positioned and what the work that you're doing really sets the stage for why I wanted all of you to be in this conversation, right? You're directly working through media, through activism, the community organizing to support girls and women in environmental justice. And so I want this to start kind of talking about, like, for you, when was the first time you considered the environment as a career path? And I want to also just think in your life in general, but we can start with, like, when was the first time that you thought about the environment as a career? Anybody who wants to answer that?
I can take a stab at it. I think the first time I got introduced to the environment was probably relatively young, as all of us, maybe in a science class or something. It wasn't until I think 2019, 2018, when I think there were like the first phases of part of the youth climate movement. For the first time, I had started to see people talk about environment in a way that wasn't far removed from people and our day-to-day livelihoods and culture and who we are, and just less scientific verbiage and more down to the root cause of climate change is really just a culmination of the societal decisions we've made, and the ways that we live is just ultimately culminating and it's impacting people first and foremost. And I think that messaging was really unique to me. I had never seen it before, and especially to the youth climate movement. So around 16, 17 years old, I was pretty young. I started getting involved with climate organizing across the country, like nationally. And so we started building networks and started mobilizing thousands of people across the world to host climate marches and strikes and conferences and sit-ins and things of that sort. So um, back then, I was really under the impression that I would go into politics. And so I was really considering a political environmental career. Obviously, like 7 years later, things have changed. I'm not as interested in the political side of things, but more so, um, I think I like to build systems. And so the first time that the environment became an option career-wise for me was when I was 16, and just being exposed to the world. And there were just a group of young people who were really empowering other young people and teaching about the environment in a way that was people first. And so I think a people approach first really drew me in and showed me that climate is so much bigger than what we know it is, and it encompasses every facet of life. And so for me, it was just like a ball drop moment that, oh, I could do this in so many different ways. And I don't have to be a scientist. I don't have to be a policy fanatic or anything. And so I would say when I was 16, and I think it ultimately ended up changing the trajectory of my life, gratefully so.
Hmm. I'll share my story, Vinta. I would say that I was first introduced to the climate issue growing up in the Bronx, and living in Harlem before, like when we decided to have children. just doing the research and realizing how poor the air quality was or is really still in Harlem, and making that decision as to like, well, where would you go to raise children? You know, and it was almost the lesser of two evils. It wasn't like Jersey had such amazing air. So we're like, oh wow. But the stats of Harlem and the Bronx were staggering as having some of the highest asthmatic rates in the nation. So that was my first real introduction to how directly the environmental issues were impacting our lives. And you know, fast forward after having my second child, my creative juices were honestly just flowing. And you know, children have a funny way of showing you who you really are and kind of putting a mirror to you, and you know, you realizing like, what do you want to bring to this world? How do you want to leave this world? And that's when I said, you know what, why don't I just, you know, take a crack at it? And I wrote my first children's book. And it was really nothing more than, what do I want to see on my children's bookshelves? And there have to be other moms, caregivers, teachers that want to see the same thing. I was very intentional of, you know, having the protagonist be a Black girl that was addressing a global issue. And it was so well received. And I mean, I'm a little older than you, Elsa. So back then in 2011, no one was really talking about the environmental issues the way they are now. But it was still well received by all. Like, I was in a bunch of mommy groups, well received. I was getting calls from libraries, schools, museums, and, you know, to do readings, but then it kind of snowballed from there. And I started getting, you know, questions, just random questions like, well, what about this? What about that? What about this product? And I decided to create an online platform where it would be a resource for green products that I use, right? Like, I'm not a scientist. By training, I'm, you know, corporate attorney, but I was like, you know, as a mom, this is what I've researched. This is what I use. These are the books that I like for my kids. And that's when I realized like, oh, this could actually be a viable business. And I didn't go back to the law firm, and I decided to focus my efforts in Tutu's green world.
Thank you all for sharing that. One thing that came up for me was also when you said like this light bulb moment of realizing you didn't have to be a scientist, you didn't have to go into policy. There was a lot of different ways. And I think, Tulani, your story is also like, there's this thread of, yes, when we're young people, sometimes there is this kind of tendency to box young folks into these like very specific pathways of lawyer, doctor, like, you know, like all these things, especially as Black women. Sometimes we specifically across the diaspora are kind of pushed towards these very like high profile jobs, which is great. And also there's so many stages and ways that we can do this work. So I love that, Elsa, you got in this at 16, and Tulani, like, you were also becoming a mom, because there's no cutoff point for us to pivot, and there's no cutoff point for us to realize a part of our purpose or a part of a passion that we have for the environment. So that really stuck out to me, and thank you for sharing those parts of your lives. I'd love to also, like, for any of the other panelists or for anyone, what surprised you most, either when you were starting or throughout your journey so far, in your role?
Yeah, so I'll hop in. Like Elsa, I got my start at a very, very early age. So when I came to DC, I came to college in DC in 2009, and I was a fresh student. And a year earlier, while I was still in high school, I had the chance to canvass for Obama. I knew that I wanted to in that moment because it was just so inspiring. Everything around it, running around with a clipboard. I just was so green and just happy about the moment that we were in. And so when I got to campus, I was like, I want to do something. I need to make a change. Like, the world is changing. The world is our oyster. We can do anything. which I really wish we had. We really need some of that right now. We need some of that enthusiasm and excitement for our future together. So I became really involved on campus, and I ended up starting this multi-group coalition across different DC campuses. We were called Students for Environmental Responsibility. And we ended up taking a cohort to Pennsylvania that next year to a PowerShip conference. I don't know if any of you have heard of PowerShip Network, but it was a big thing at the time. And we got this big training from a group of people from Green Corps, which is another environmental thing that was going on at the time. And they trained us in the craft of grassroots organizing. And really got this crash course, came back and started organizing events. One of the biggest things we did was we helped organize our first sort of climate rally in DC. It was in 2011. It was called Forward on Climate. And we got 250,000 people there. And I was on a rush. I was like, oh, like, this is great work. Like, this is what I should be doing all day, meeting people, interacting with people, building community. There was such an emphasis on that at the time. And, you know, I didn't realize until sort of the end of my tenure, and I ended up being I got an apprenticeship with the Sierra Club to work on this campaign called Beyond Coal, and ended up back in Pittsburgh. And I was like, oh, I can get paid to be on a bullhorn all day. I can get paid to, you know, meet people, talk to people, show up at conferences, table. Like, it was just very, I was always moving. And so I would say at the time, like, really engaged in, I'm not going to say it was easy work. Like, I couldn't do that now. I mean, you have to be really like in it, working around the clock. I mean, you might be called up to do a banner build at, you know, 10 o'clock at night. Greenpeace used to have this big warehouse where they used to do art builds, and they would put out a call to action to all the organizers in the area. And they say, come and help us build art, you know, art pieces and installation pieces, and come help us paint banners. And so we just show up there and do that. Again, at the time, I was like, wow, I'm getting paid to do stuff that like really builds community. And I was surprised at that, because I didn't learn about that in school. Such a different way to have a career that wasn't at a desk, that wasn't a typical 9 to 5, that, you know, didn't require me to sit in front of a computer screen all day. Like, I worked out of coffee shops and in warehouses and out of the backseat of a bus. And a lot of, I was able to grow in that space because I was at the Sierra Club at the time. So this was around 2014, 2015, and everything around Mike Brown happened. And Sierra Club ended up giving us grants to go to Ferguson. Right, that was something that, you know, this is a national environmental organization. They're not very steeped in racial justice or anything like that, but we were a part of a new wave of people coming into the organization. And we were changing the club from the inside out. Ended up joining the union, transformed the union. So it was just a lot of momentum around that. And what has surprised me across that is like how much we were able to sort of move and shake in a time in a time where people were excited about what we could build. And so that's surprising. And then also all that we could do in community with one another was actually really surprising to me. And I just think that I want to help. I want us to be able to sort of lean into that vision for ourselves now, when we're in a world that is really trying to suppress imagination and our visions for the future. And so I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think what's so great about hearing about other people's stories is seeing the synergy that exists, which I think for many of us, when we started, we could have never known how big the ecosystem of, women of color and like Black women in particular, in the climate space. So to answer the question of what surprised me the most, it's twofold. The first big surprise is, like Elsa, I got my start really young. I was 15 when I like had my big aha moment. I was like, I want to dedicate my life to EJ. And everyone around me was like, what is she talking about? What is EJ? What is climate work? I didn't even know. The only thing I could articulate was I'll be a mediator between politicians and environmental scientists. That's all I could regurgitate because that's all I could find online about what it could look like. But when I decided to join the movement, I decided to study environmental science at my undergraduate institution, Go Huskies, UConn. Probably the biggest shock to me was the fact that I was constantly the only, person of color, only Black girl in all my classes. All my professors were white. Environmental justice as a term didn't come up until my junior year. And so I spent a lot of my academic journey, even at grad school, teaching a lot more than I thought I would have to. And with that came a lot of, I think, emotional and intellectual exhaustion of kind of being a student, but then also at the same time being really frustrated at the lack of inclusion of Black and Indigenous scholars' voices in our curriculums, as well as understanding the way that EJ really has to be at the core of really any conversation that we have about climate solutions, and just being really frustrated at its absence. In my undergrad, when I went to grad school in the UK, and that was very frustrating. But then on the other end of that, because I wasn't finding the community and really intellectual stimulation that I had from my classroom, I started finding it in abundance outside. And I think that's where, in 2020, I wrote an op-ed for Vice that went really viral, and I had a lot of Black women who were much older than me, and then also Black women my same age and younger than me, reaching out to me and saying, hey, I'm also a Black girl in this space. I also have very similar experiences to you. I also felt like I was the only one, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was like, whoa, there's so many of us. There's like so many more that I could have ever imagined. And so that was, second part of the question of something that surprised me. And it wasn't necessarily that it was a surprise, because like from like an academic point of view, right? Like if you look at any social movement, like Black women have always been at the forefront of quite literally every social movement in American history. And then also like from an organizing perspective, whenever I would, engage in EJ organizing things, it was very clear that it was mostly Black and brown mothers who were running everything. But then at the same time, I'm like looking at my classrooms, I'm in these like prestigious places that are supposed to be, identifying the next generation leaders, et cetera. And I'm like, why are there no like Black girls in here? So I think over the past several years, I've been really intentional about being in spaces where we are, and then B, also helping to cultivate spaces for us to meet and connect and build power and community together, because it's really important.
Thank you all so much for that. And one thing that I love, you mentioned synergy, Wawa, and like thinking about having to teach, right? As we're coming into spaces, as you mentioned too, a lot of times Black folks and Black women are at the forefront, and mothers are at the forefront of social movements, because those folks are so connected to all these different areas of our lived experience, right? You cannot talk about society without talking about care. And so the caregivers are the folks who are usually most in tune to that. And so often we are setting the tone and setting the tone without sometimes being able to set the pace and to decide like who's in the room. So I would love to hear advice, and this is, sorry, I'm going a little bit off the question, but you can feel free to answer the original question. I'll give both of them. I'm wondering what advice specifically you all might have around keeping this work sustainable. So, and I mean like energy wise, your nourishment wise, like this is, as Jamika, you also mentioned, like this is work that can be uplifting. You can have this feeling of like this rush, right? but also we know that we're in a long term, we're in a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm wondering, like, any advice for folks who are just entering or maybe have been in here for a minute about keeping the work sustainable for you? And then just in general, for folks who want to pivot and do this work, but also I'll once again keep it sustainable over time. I would love to hear about that because I often think about, as folks on the forefront, how much is put on us to teach, how much is put on us to represent. And that's another layer. That emotional labor is another layer, which in some ways I feel sometimes honored by, in other ways sometimes I feel like I didn't ask I didn't ask for this other layer of being a human and being a Black person, and then also having to carry that. So just we'll love to hear what folks have to say or think about that.
I mean, I'll share with what has helped me. It's really the village for me, and my village, my village is very varied in thought, in age, in gender, but the common thread is that they support and challenge me, right, at the same time. And I would be remiss to not even mention my faith. I feel like that goes without saying, but I will say it. Having a strong faith is essential, really, in anything you choose to do. That's what I tell my kids. They'll make fun of me, like, oh yeah, I gotta separate the paper and the glass, mama. But at the end of the day, if that's not if they don't choose to get into the environmental fight, of course, I've instilled those green habits, so that's going to go with them. But the faith is essential whatever path they choose. And in this long, arduous journey of environmental fight, you have to, I definitely lean on my faith. I say lean on your village, and balance, right? Like, the creativity for me is like, it feeds me as well as, my more logical side, the law, whatever, but it all is intertwined. And I make it a point to bring both sides of myself to my passion. So, I walk this as a creative, and also as, a corporate person, as a lawyer. And it's helped me with, navigating partnerships and also connecting with other artists and other storytellers. So I would say, faith, village, and balance.
I can chime in. I think something that I really admire of some organizations that I've been able to connect um, is that they take the earth very literally. And so they apply that to their work. So everything that they do, it ebbs and flows. And we do movement work, for lack of better words, like not what was true yesterday is not true today. And so the way that we think and the way that we organize and the way that we connect with one another, it has to reflect that. And so there are organizations and individuals that when they plan out their year in the summertime and the springtime, that's when they get active. That's when they're releasing their programs. That's when they're doing their outreach. During the fall, that's when they're planning. That's when they're getting to know people. That's when they're ideating. Winter is when they're taking a break. Winter is when they're slowing down. They're doing inventory. They're planning for the year. And so that's just one way of operating. But if you want to do work like this, that this is mission driven work. It's not business driven work, it's impact driven work. And so impact requires a lot of you. And so you have to really honor your transformation. You have to honor your truth. Like Jamaica, you said law, you did law for a while. Law wasn't the space for someone colorful like you. You have other skill sets to offer the environmental space. And so you honored that part of your journey and you said, okay, now I'm on to the next. And so, like, for me, I've had to change a lot. Like, I used to be an organizer in the movement spaces. That was my thing, like, connector, speaker, organizer, like in the trenches. And then a few years passed and I was like, that's not my role anymore. Like, I'm not getting out of it what I once put into it, it's just not for me. And now my role is different. I love it. And so I think as young women, you really have to honor your transformation in this space and go with what calls you. And in your work, our work has to be sustainable and it has to reflect Earth and her natural path and things of that sort. And so you have to really just think what I'm putting in, is it worthwhile? Am I getting out of it what I'm putting in? Is this honest to me? Am I creating the impact that I want to see? You really have to honor that journey for yourself. And if at one point it no longer is matching up with what's in your head, that's okay. You can pivot, you can take a break, you can do something else because this is for the long run. There is no like, at the end of 10 years, this is the goal I like to see. There is no, because every time we set a goal, the benchmark changes. It doesn't stay the same. The goal we had 3 months ago is not the same benchmarks that we have. Like they're constantly changing. And so our efforts have to be evolving just as much if we want to be sustainable, especially for young girls who are really prone and susceptible to burnout in a lot of these green spaces. I think we have to make that abundantly clear for those who are looking to join spaces like this.
I'll just add something quickly and briefly. So I think a lot of times we're working to solve these mass issues that are impacting our community. And you might be at an organization that's like, bump like your own personal needs, your own personal safety, and anything that's going on internally with you. The movement is bigger than yourself. And in some aspects, that's the truth. But you can't take care of other folks if you're not taking care of yourself. And so for me, that meant doing things that energized me to be able to come and show up to my job. So sometimes that looks like taking a beat, taking a step away, taking a moment to breathe, take care of myself, going to have some fun time and some fun days with my girls. Having friendships outside of the movement space also has helped as well. Like, because sometimes you can have friends and y'all can you can ruminate about all this stuff like over and over and over. And my brain needs a break. So that's one. Number two is in my workspace, finding a sense of community within there. And I was lucky enough to come into some of these green spaces at a time where there was an influx of women of color that I could lean on and depend on. And we found ways to advocate for ourselves in the midst of everything going on. And one of the ways we did that was we formed a union. We helped revamp and form the union. And that meant that not only were we able to advocate for the communities we were working with, but for ourselves at the same time. And what does equitable pay systems look like for us? What does what sort of healthcare do we need to thrive? What sort of working conditions do we want to work under? A lot of that gets thrown to the side because, oh, we're in a progressive space, but that doesn't mean anything. We're all working under this system, and this system is extremely extractive, no matter if you're in a progressive or a green space or not. And so you have to remember yourself and what's good for me as well. What is going to help me thrive for the long term as I'm working towards this particular goal. And then lastly, this emphasis on this is a marathon. And so again, if you need to take a moment or a beat to pivot, you're like Elsa said, this doesn't work for me anymore. This is not my role anymore. I've evolved out of this, and being willing to pivot in those moments and not be beholden to something, not being holding to a skill set that you might be good at, but that you don't feel aligned with you anymore. So just giving yourself that grace as well.
So many gems and wisdom dropped there. I mean, ooh, I feel like the community aspect is really, really huge. And like being able to shift and pivot, and knowing that your community has you, that you have people who are there for you, can witness you in your different seasons. I loved what Elsa mentioned about flowing with the season, what Tulani mentioned about faith. I often find, I find God in nature often, like remembering that when I'm working for nature, like to spend time actually outside, like with the trees and the birds, at the water, that replenishes my soul. And continuing to push for pay equity, talking about like, and really having spaces where you can, ask for guidance from other folks who have been through different situations, form collectives with folks, like that's all a part of that sustainable, making it sustainable. I loved all the advice and just the wisdom that you all shared. I'd love to now we talked a little bit about how do we bring in some of that joy and wonder and also like upliftment into this moment, right? And I would love to hear what some of your biggest dreams are for women and girls in the field. And then more broadly, I think that just to also reiterate, yes, we want to uplift like the young folks, like to be able to do this work and to be able to do it in radically different ways that were even available 5 years ago, 2 years ago, like to continue to innovate. And also that at every stage of life, whether you are a mother, a senior, no matter what stage, you can also be a part of that revolution. You can pivot into this field. And so I would love to hear your dreams for women and girls in this field.
I can jump in. So transparently, I think I'm not gonna go on a whole rant on like the nonprofit industrial complex and how like nonprofits aren't gonna save the world, et cetera. But I mean, ideally, I would love a world where Black girls don't have to be activists. There's no climate crisis. We've solved it all. We're living in abundance. We're thriving. We're resting, et cetera. Like that is a North Star. That is a goal. The goal is for BGE not to have to exist anymore. I'd be so happy if that was the case. I can go on and be a jazz singer, but that's not, that's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. So I think there are ways that we can essentially create this future that we want to see in our organizing spaces, in the organizations that we're cultivating and a part of, in our relationships with each other. So that's what I want to see. I want us to have more opportunities to be audacious and be radical. I think most of what we're doing, any of us are doing, it really isn't radical. It's really not that radical. But others might say that it's radical because we're daring to think of loving a better world into existence, a world that's never existed before, but a world that I think we all believe is possible. And I would love to see more opportunities for us to just engage in joy. Like we have so much going on in our world. We have how many genocides happening around the world. We're quite literally witnessing atrocities on our phones constantly, and that has almost been the backdrop of many of our lives, right? Especially as folks across the diaspora. And there is still such an importance in us holding on to our joy, holding on to our humanity, holding each other, and understanding that we can and should be able to still experience joy in the midst of these circumstances, not as a mechanism to turn a blind eye, but rather to say, I am holding on to the humanity of others and myself, and I want to make sure that I am, again, like everyone has said, nurturing myself, nurturing my soul, so that I'm able to show up for others and myself. And that's, at the core, what sustainability looks like as social impact practitioners, as people, as, Black women in climate, et cetera. And the other thing that I would like to see, which goes off of what was just previously said, is for us to have, more conversations around pay equity, having more conversations about, ensuring that there is space for multiple people to be able to like be platformed, et cetera. And I think those things are sometimes left out. And it is important for everyone to have an opportunity to have the mic. We all have stories to tell. We all have expertise to share. And I think it's really important for that to be centered in this work. And then, from the nonprofit end of things, I would love to see, more unrestricted grants, multi-year grants. I would love to see, more folks being funded abundantly, and for us to, move away from this antiquated model of kind of having to always prove in these antiquated ways the metrics of why it's important for people to come together. That has been a big struggle for us, a lot of other folks, where we're just trying to quantify why it's important for Black femmes and Black women to come together. And it's like, well, like, let's look at all these movements, but sometimes funders are like, well, that's not tangible. And I'm like, well, to you, it's not, because you're not opening yourself up to expanding what your notions of success could look like. And I love to see more people embrace, again, not to use the word abundance again, but the abundance of what success could and should look like as we're building a better world.
I would say that, my dream is to have more Wawas, more Elsas, more Jamikas, so where it's the norm, where it's the norm for our girls to lead and to be empowered to lead in this space, right? Like where we're in the boardrooms, creating policy, we're in the classrooms, teaching the next generation, we're in the labs, doing the innovation, like that's my dream for us to see more girls. Is the norm for us to be leading this climate fight. And, there aren't those spaces where you walk in and you feel that you're one of few fighting a fight that is impacting more people that look like you that are not in the room, right? That's my dream, for me to walk into these conferences and not be mistaken to be someone's assistant, but to be a CEO of a company. That's my dream, for that to be the norm.
I can add briefly. I think both of you guys really covered. I think we all share the same dream, essentially. Mine would be, I want every girl, every Black girl to have a safety net to do this work, and be like, you know what, I want to give it a shot. I like weather science. I'm going to give that a shot. Okay, there are systems for you to do that. There are ways for you to get there. There are systems to support you. There are people that are willing to welcome you. You're not alone on this journey. There's funding for education. There's funding for researchers. There's funding for girls who want to create really cool, top of the line, sustainable, clean makeup or hair products. I just wish the creativity of what is possible, I think, is what I really envision. I think the green market is going to take us by storm unless we miss the opportunity, which we could. And I really want to see Black girls at the forefront making waves, but also being compensated fairly and equitably, and being leaders if they want to be. But most of all, I just want there to be a safety net for young girls to be able to dream and give it a shot, just like any other group of people.
Thank you all for that. I mean, yes to everything you said. I was just thinking about recently, I had the privilege, the opportunity to take a short sabbatical. And while I was doing that, I thought about like how many generations of women in my family never had the opportunity to see what happens for them when they rest deeply. What's possible creatively, what messages come through when you're just like on a hammock with the trees. And also just how that space of rest can just give you so much. And many people around, like many femmes and girls and women around the world, do not have that capacity to see what just happens, what naturally arises. And so that is definitely my hope, and my dream is for everyone to have that space of rest, and to have it be elongated for a year or 2 years or however, like to be able to really like create without the worries and the stress of many of the things we see today. So, and I believe that's possible. And as Wawa said, like, it's not that radical. I mean, we've had it before in our histories. And so we know that it's possible. And so, yes, I want that to come into being. I would love to open this up for folks here, all of you here, if anyone has anything they would like to share, any questions that are coming up for you, or just comments that are coming up for you. I'd love to hear from this community here. You can also put things in the chat if you would like. I see Namo says holding on to joy, the time to rest, the ability to dream. Yes, that all sounds right. Yes, to me too. Yes. I also, as we, oh, I heard something. Well, if you feel free to unmute yourself if you like, or raise your hand. Trying to make sure I'm keeping up with the folks here, but I will just, my last question for the panel, is there something, what's a question or something that you are working through in your professional life right now? What's something that's just emerging that it doesn't have to be, you know, something complete, or just like a thought that is like just coming up for you? You could think on that, and I'll read. I see another comment in the chat from Kala. I love the idea of all of our nonprofits being obsolete in the future because life is equitable and good. A dream for all the days. Yes, yes.
Binta, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Sorry.
I was too busy looking at who was on the chat.
You see, I was also there too. Like I was getting caught up. I was wondering, like, what's something that is just like emerging for you right now? A question, a thought that is like just on your mind that maybe hasn't fully formed, but it's just something you're working through in your professional life.
It's really scalability.
Mhm.
For me, scaling while, you know, not diluting the authenticity and the heart of Tutu, the heart of our mission at Tutu's Green World. I think I shared with you that I'm looking at what we did from a nonprofit and getting a 501c3 status, and, you know, using that as a vehicle to bring out programming to communities that may not be able to afford us, but, you know, kind of bridging the world of people who want to make a change and who can, with their resources, with folks that need to receive the programming and want to receive the programming but may not be able to afford. So that's where I'm at right now. So I'm loving being in this group of women who are, you know, very well seasoned in their nonprofit journey.
So I am focused on in my dissertation the intersection between climate change and authoritarianism. And one of the things I feel like we're going to have to grapple with after we're out of the moment that we're in, because this will pass. There are always moments of upheaval in our country, and you know we have to hunker down through the storm, and we have to fight to hold on to our rights that our ancestors fought to so that we could have them. And so the things that I'm thinking through is, what does a roadmap look like to get us to our next phase of progress? And we're going to need all sorts of people to build and rebuild the sort of systems in the world that we need to take us into that next moment of thriving. And we already know that climate change is happening, and we are at these moments where we need to be in equilibrium with nature. And all that innovation and talent from all the Black girls around the world is just waiting, you know, to burst through. And so how do we support that next generation of leaders to implement and to build their ideas and their dream world. And so those are the things I'm thinking through right now. What piece of the road can I help build? What piece of the vision can I help build? Like I said, I'm not trying to do it all. I'm trying to take what I can do and take it forward. And I think that's all of us on this call. We're like, we need to do this together. So take our part, our piece, and push it forward. But I think folks are going to be looking for direction, and we should be prepared to help give it to them.
I have a question. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Hi, Imani.
Yes. Hi, how are you? Thank you all for having this forum today. I wanted to find out, what are the next immediate action steps that each of you are taking on your own projects in terms of pushing your initiatives forward, and what do you feel is the most crucial thing that you can do today, next week, next month, that's going to push your agenda forward?
Did everyone hear the question? Which is, what is the next immediate steps in your initiatives to push forward the initiatives? Imani, let me know if I got that right.
That's pretty much it. What is the urgent thing, the thing that you're grappling with? What it may not necessarily be something that's a challenge, but something that what are the next steps to push your goals forward that you're focused on right now?
Thank you.
Yeah, I can jump in. And also feel free to jump in as well, because it's something that we talk a lot about. For our team, and I'm sure this isn't a experience that, I know it's not an experience that is ours alone. We really had to think about what our priority was, aka scalability or sustainability. And I think in other times, even just 2 years ago, those went hand in hand. Right now, that's not necessarily the case, in which, just to address, the elephant in the room of any climate room, and especially climate justice room, especially organizations led and run by Black women and organizations serving our demographic, it is becoming harder and harder for us to obtain funding, harder and harder for us to understand what the changes are happening in the legal in the legal landscape. We have so many attacks happening to organizations inside the climate movement, outside the climate movement, around quote unquote DE&I and climate. And so I think, being an organization called Black Girl Environmentalists that can't hide behind, who we serve, why we serve, who we serve, and also not wanting to hide, that has come with some repercussions in the sense of past partners not wanting to work with us anymore, potential funders who are very, used to respond, used to get copies, used to be interested in potentially funding us, going ghost. Some folks being like, listen, I love your work, but my organization can't be seen supporting an organization like yours. These are just conversations that, I myself have had, else has had, and it has definitely impacted the way that we're thinking about the future of our organization. So right now, the next step is sustainability, is to the ability for us to continue to do the programs that we have now, continue to assess how we can improve them, and to continue to be committed to our work. Because, there is a potential reality where an organization called Black Girl Environmentalist may not be legally viable. That's not the case right now. And so we're going to do our work for as long as we can. And even if, the tides change, we'll just have to get creative in how we continue to serve the folks that we serve. Immediately, a specific project, we have one of our Hazel and Johnson fellows, I believe, on the call right now. We're wrapping up that fellowship. So that's a fellowship where we had this past summer 16 early career BGEs. So those are either current college students or recent graduates up to 2 years that were placed at different climate internships for the summer for 10 weeks. We worked with those organizations to ensure that each of the fellows received at least $18 an hour. And then we, on top of that, provided a $5,000 living wage stipend to support the fellows with any relocation costs of living, food, and then whatever else they needed. Some fellows use it on therapy, some folks used it on vacation. It's really up to them, educational costs and fees. And we are really excited to be working on our third cohort this upcoming fall, even though the cohort's not over and we're still loving all getting to connect with the fellows right now. But we're excited to start developing programming for our third cohort and are just really grateful to still have partners who see the power in a program that just so proudly supports the next generation of Black girls in the space, and does so in the honor of the great Hazel Johnson.
Woo woo. I love to hear it. So Rise to Thrive is working on something kind of similar, but we are partnered with an organization called Out for Justice in Baltimore, and we're working with their formerly incarcerated women that are a part of their membership base, and we ran a leadership academy with them. This is our third summer doing it, and similarly, they're trained in environmental justice topics. It's really intensive. And then this year at the end, we're doing they're trained as community researchers. So they're going to be out in Baltimore collecting community health data. And then we're going to take that and create a report out of it. So that's one thing. And then we are also stepping in to help run the Maryland Environmental Justice Table through the Climate and Clean Energy Equity Fund. So excited to do that as well. But again, like Wawa said, we're working on sustainability. So, a year ago, we were like scale, but now we're like hunkering down and doing what we can based on the resources that we have available. How can we support our communities with what we have? And so leaning into that. Yeah, so that's where we are right now. And then personally, through the Afrofuturism cohort, I'm just about, I'm almost done. I am working on my offering to the community. And one of the pieces of that is I created a Afrofuturism playlist to go along with it, y'all. So that's something fun to look forward to it. Yeah.
I love that playlist idea. Music is my vibe. So my next steps, basically everything that Wawa and Jamaica said, in this climate, really looking to be sustainable and looking at our current partners and how I can add more value and more programming and reach and, provide them with more of what we've been, working with. So with the schools, they've asked and requested teacher guides and lesson plans for the books that they already have, my books that they already have in their schools. So working with teacher to provide that. And also a partnership with the Office of Sustainability with Newark, New Jersey. They have an initiative to plant 500 trees by the end of the year over the next 10 years. So each year there'll be 500 trees. And I am partnering with them to bring that to the schools in Newark. So, along with the book readings and the art projects, the green art projects, the kids will be planting trees. So yeah, it's really just about continuing the green work, continuing the green fight. And, in at Tutu's Green World, we feel like I see it, the children are really the change makers, and they go and bring it back home to their communities, to their, to the parents. They'll say, Mom, why is your water running? Where's my reusable water bottle? So I'm just being very mindful to continue influencing the young folks by bordering the what I'm bringing to my current partners.
Thank you all so much. I mean, as you can hear, I mean, there's incredible work happening. And so if you are ever feeling in that space where, you know, it can get to us sometimes, all the things that are happening, just know that as you see here, there are folks working directly on some incredible projects for our earth, for our young folks, for femmes and women around the world. And I just want to thank you all for being here. Just so you know, you will receive this replay as long alongside resources that we mentioned today. So you'll find out about Black Girl Environmentalist, the fellowship program, Rise. I'm sorry, Jamaica, what is the name of your organization as well? Yes, Rise to Thrive, as well as Tutu's Green World. You'll have those resources as well with some other community resources to find out about the Afrofuturism Collective. So stay tuned for that. And once again, I just thank you so much to Lonnie, Wawa, Elsa, Jamaica for being here, for sharing all that you shared, and for all of you for being here in this space with us. We appreciate the work because I know many people here are also doing this work and having incredible impact. So I appreciate you and all the ways that you contribute. Thank you, and I'm wishing you all a great rest of your day.
Thank
Bye, y'all.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.